£36,000 in fund. Good luck.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
What is the solution to liberate people in the concentration camp called Palestine?
Jihad!
What is the solution?
Jihad!
Allah
Jihad! Jihad!
Jihad!
Shocking revelations as the police admit to two-tier justice in Britain. And
last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners.
We're going to have to be unpopular. Popular decisions aren't tough, they're easy.
Labour's own report suggests 4,000 old people could die if Starmer cuts winter fuel payments. But does he care? Plus...
You lead the way. As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment.
Princess Catherine gives a positive, if slightly concerning, health update, and... 2,000 violent thugs, sex offenders, maybe even terrorists could be released tomorrow onto the streets of lawless Britain. Also...
Let's start with the Islamist militant group that carried out this attack. Who are Hamas?
But more than 1,000 people have now been killed in Israel and Gaza after a massive attack by Hamas militants that began at dawn.
The BBC breached its own guidelines 1,500 times over the Israel-Hamas conflict. Is it institutionally anti-Israel? And Starmer's smashed the gang's promises in tatters as the National Crime Agency crumbles. On my panel tonight, it's Express columnist Carol Malone. We've also got journalist Benjamin Butterworth and ex-Tory chairman Sir Jake Berry. Oh, and what's the story behind this clip?
Down it, down it, down it, down it, quick, quick.
Get ready, Britain, here we go. The police admit going soft on jihad. Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 9 o'clock. The Chancellor has warned about difficult decisions to come on tax and spending cuts during a meeting with Labour MPs. Rachel Reeves also told MPs that she is not immune to concerns over winter fuel allowance plans. Earlier, Downing Street said Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet is united behind plans to cut winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. It comes as two of the biggest unions have put further pressure on the government to soften its policy. MPs will vote tomorrow on the plans to scrap the payment. Now, the Princess of Wales has finished her chemotherapy treatment and said her focus is to stay cancer-free. She made the announcement in a heartfelt family video showing her spending private time with Prince William and her children. Princess Catherine revealed in March that she was undergoing cancer treatment and has been out of public view since then. She is set to carry out a few engagements this year, which could include remembrance events in November and her annual Christmas Carol concert. Now, in other news, a man who raped and stabbed Joanne Tulip 60 times in a sadistic murder in Northumberland 27 years ago should be freed from prison. That's according to the parole board. Stephen Ling was jailed for life in December 1998 after admitting his horrific attack on Joanne, who was 29 years old. Ling was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 20 years, which was reduced to 18 years by the High Court. Transport Secretary Louise Hay said her thoughts are with Joanne's family.
First and foremost, all my thoughts are with Joanne Tulip's family and everyone who loved her. This is an appalling situation for them to have lived through and now be worrying about. I know the Justice Secretary is considering whether that decision can be appealed and whether it can be reconsidered, whether she can request for the parole board to reconsider it, but it is an independent parole board.
Meanwhile, victims of domestic abuse are facing sleepless nights ahead of Labour's early prison release scheme. That's according to the Domestic Abuse Commissioner. Speaking to the Sunday Times, Nicole Jacobs warned that some victims may not be aware that their attackers could soon be free. Up to 1,750 offenders will be released tomorrow under the Ministry of Justice's emergency plan to ease the overcrowding crisis in jails. And some breaking news. Disgraced film producer Harvey Weinstein is in hospital in New York for emergency heart surgery after experiencing chest pain. That's according to US media. The 72-year-old was convicted of rape and sexual assault in 2020 in New York and jailed for 23 years. Those convictions were overturned this April when an appeal judge ruled he did not receive a fair trial. He has, however, remained in jail because of another rape conviction in 2022. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, the cat's out of the bag. Police have confirmed that there is two-tier justice and Keir Starmer stands accused of being responsible for it. They've also admitted that they should have nicked people shouting jihad, and they didn't. People a bit like this.
The only solution is jihad by the armies of the Muslim countries. Not by you, me, or we. What training do I have? There are people with arms in Egypt, in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, across the Muslim world.
We were told that there are many contexts in which jihad can be shouted, and there were people like this as well who appear to be waving what is apparently an Islamist jihad flag. So the Assistant Commissioner at the Met, Matt Twist, said on occasion we did not move quickly to make arrests. For example, the man chanting for jihad, which was a decision made following fast-time advice from lawyers and the Crown Prosecution Service. But here is the killer line, Sir Keir Starmer, when it comes to two-tier Britain, OK? So the new head of the Police Superintendents Association, Nick Smart, said, "We looked at how quickly offenders were brought to justice over the riots, and it is not lost on the police service or anybody else within the criminal justice system how swift and effective that was. And we would like to see that for all victims. It is a massive frustration for the police that they are not." So that, for me, is an admittance of two-tier justice. And where did that come from?
400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity.
and a number of them are already in court. And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week. That should send a very powerful message to anybody involved, either directly or online.
Yeah, well, it came from the Prime Minister, didn't it? And the Home Office. But it also comes from the police, OK? So do you remember when then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Downing Street and said this to the police about the pro-Palestine protests?
This week, I've met with senior police officers and made clear it is the public's expectation that they will not merely manage these protests, but police them. And I say this to the police: we will back you when you take action.
They did nothing. They didn't take action. And one word, though, one word from a Labour Prime Minister on the riots, and we've got arrests on demand, we've got people in court and sent to prison within a few days. Now, here's the cost of appeasing the pro-Palestine mob, because £42.9 million has apparently been spent policing the protests in London alone between October and June. 51,799 police officer shifts deployed and diverted from covering issues like knife crime, violence against women and girls and antisocial behaviour. And today, really, given what those two police officers have said, OK, they reveal what I think many of us already knew. Police were too slow to police actual jihad on the streets, and anyone associated with the so-called far right was hammered harder and quicker than anyone else. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I've got Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, we've got journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former chairman of the Tory party, Sir Jake Berry. Carol, actually quite an extraordinary intervention, I think, today, from two different leading police officers, confirming what many people already knew. I mean, firstly, they said they were too soft on people chanting for jihad. It's almost like it doesn't have multiple different
Completely
contexts.
true. You know, what we saw after Southport was a particular kind of justice, and what we've seen with the pro-Palestinian riots is that, you know, the colour of your skin matters, your religion matters, your political persuasion matters, and that is a shocking state of affairs for our cops to be in. You know, the cops also said, and this Matt white guy said today, he said, you know, we are neutral on the protest, the cause of the protest. Well, no, they're not neutral on the cause of the protest. They weren't neutral with Black Lives Matter. They actually knelt in front of Black Lives Matter. They weren't neutral on the protest where they tore the Edward Coulson statue down. That was also Black Lives Matter. In fact, Copper there, one of the police chiefs, said, we have some sympathy with their cause, with the slavery cause, with them protesting about it. So they weren't neutral there either. They certainly weren't neutral on the Just Stop Oil rights, just moving away from Palestine for a second. You know, they were giving tea and water and biscuits to people who might have got a bit hot in the sun because they were protesting and blocking the streets.
Is there anything we can do for you?
Yes, can we help you?
While you're in the road.
So they're not neutral. You can tell the causes that they care about and espouse. And the people that came down on Southport, quite rightly, jail them, but jail all the rest as well. If you're shouting for jihad in the streets, we all know what that means. It means armed struggle. You're calling for armed struggle.
Well, there you go. Benjamin, the police there were massively frustrated, that's the quote, massively frustrated that not all criminals are treated with the same speed and efficiency as the rioters. Well, that came from Keir Starmer, didn't it?
I think, you know, I have a degree of sympathy, which is to say that the reality of trying to arrest all these people in the moment when the scale of it is difficult to handle could make things worse rather than better at that point in time. And so what the police kept saying was, we are using camera footage and other information like that and we'll follow these people up. But quite evidently, not many of these people were followed up, and that wasn't off-putting enough to stop it happening. Last Saturday, there was a massive protest on the Palestine issue, and I live in central London, so it happened near my flat as I walked out on a Saturday afternoon, and every single lamppost had a poster on it which said, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Now, that has been accepted to be anti-Semitic. And so I went down each lamppost and I pulled every single one of them down on my walk, and then I went to the police officers that were stood there.
Let me guess, they arrested you.
Yeah. Well, they were a bit caught with me, but I said, Kurt, pardon me, I said, how are these all up? I've just pulled them down, but it continues for ages. Yeah. And unless Casper put those up, why didn't you say anything when people were putting anti-Semitic posters up? And I think that was prime example.
Yeah.
And this has been going on for months now.
It's been going on for months. Jay, you know, Rishi Sunak there, we played that clip, and that was, you know, so was after a few weeks of this nonsense going on. And he says, look, you know, the public expects the police to do something about this. And they do. You know, some of the other figures that came out today were the percentages of people who completely changed their life plans and damaged the economy, by the way, by not wanting to go to the shops on a Saturday or doing those because of this stuff. You know, he said that to the police, we will back you if you take action. The police didn't do anything. One word from a Labour Prime Minister, and you've got, you know, the police nicking people with the rioters. You've got a justice system fast-tracking people through it. Is there a left-wing bias when it comes to the police and our justice system?
Oh, yes, there is, isn't there? And over the summer, here on GB News, we were talking about two-tier care and the two-tier approach to policing. We were labelled conspiracy theorists. It was like, this doesn't exist. Now the police have come out themselves and admitted that there is a two-tier approach to justice, which all of the viewers to GB News and right-minded people in this country, they know. You have people shouting, you know, from, you know, about jihad and, you know, from London to Gaza, we want to see intifada. The police did absolutely nothing, as far as I can tell. There was they lost control of the streets. There was 500,000 people going onto the streets, chanting terrorism chants. And, you know, it's all very well. I sort of appreciate what you say about they arrest people when they get the opportunity to do so. But the fact they didn't intervene because it was a bit difficult and they might upset some of the other rioters is completely wrong.
The police chief did cite that as an example. He said, we have to think about the safety of our officers. Well, if you apply that kind of logic for every protest, no protest is ever going to be taken on.
Getting involved in any crime is a risk.
If a cop was frightened to get involved in a crime, they shouldn't be coppers. And I just think, the police chiefs, I feel sorry for the coppers on the ground because they're told to do one thing by their chiefs, and the chiefs are excusing
It's not the police. But they had the same
time.
chiefs. This is the thing. They had the same police chiefs when we had a Tory government as we did when we have a Labour government. We had the same judges, really, for the most part, and the same judicial system as when we had a Tory government as when we've got a Labour government. And Benjamin, the concern that I have is that when you look at this now, I do ask you the same question. Is there a left-wing bias when it comes to people at the top of the police force and with judges?
No, I don't think there's a left-wing bias. And I think what's happened in these Palestine marches is that they are ignorant. I don't think they understand the nature of the language that is in front of them. I don't think they understand the law. And I don't think they're backed up to behave in a way that would stop these protests. But you know, the fact is, and it's a police officer that said this to me, you know, when people turn up to some of these anti-immigration marches that became riots, and the people that turn up in Westminster on behalf of groups like the EDL, they turn up to fight and to damage things. So it's no wonder that the police tackle them far more sternly in the first place. Well, that's not the nature of most protests.
I'm not being funny, Ben.
Listen, can we just go to the riots in Birmingham when Muslims were on the streets and they had masks all over their faces, which actually are illegal. You're not allowed to wear that. Why weren't they arrested?
How times change.
They weren't arrested.
The people protesting about Palestine, I tell you, makes absolutely zero difference to the Israeli government what people do. The only thing that matters to them in terms of the behaviour in Palestine is the view of the American government. The people turning up to protest on the street, and actually there's no real effect, as appalling as that conflict is, there's no real effect in Britain. The people turning up to protest about immigration are protesting about real things in their community that are changing, stopping them seeing their GPs. So they should be out protesting. These sort of rent-a-mob coming out for Palestine, you know, what they're protesting for, it doesn't make a difference.
I do find it very interesting now when you look back at things like what Rishi Sunak said there, and he's out there basically being nice but begging the police to do something. You saw that Tory government really begging on a few fronts there, certainly the Home Office when it came to... Sorry, it's true, and fair enough, because nothing else was working. You know, when it came to things like dealing with illegal immigration or deporting people or getting Rwanda off the ground, all of that stuff, and nothing was happening, nothing could be done. And then Keir Starmer opens his mouth, preemptively finds, I would argue, quite a few people guilty before they've gone to court, and says, I want strict justice, and bang, it happens. And for me, that is a really big question that we have to ask ourselves. Are things getting done in the public sector because they've got a Labour government?
Because there are a religious element to this as well. I think there could be both. But I think if you're going to tackle it, you have to change the protest laws in this country. You can't have protest laws that bring whole countries to a standstill for weeks and months on end. You can't have protest laws that encourage hatred of a particular race of people. And that's what we've got currently.
All I'd say is the challenge with our Conservative government is the government had run out of mandate. I was part of it. The civil service had stopped doing the job of moving on with new policies, thought it's time for a general election. Keir Starmer, whatever he's doing, right or wrong, he has a mandate to do it, and that is why the public sector is moving to support his every whim.
Yeah, fair enough. I think as well, just to come back to what we had right at the start there, which is, you know, the police now admitting that they were too slow to arrest people for shouting jihad in the street. It's too late. It's too late. It's happened now. It's been happening for months, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. Look, thank you very much. A lively start, everybody. Time now, yet another screeching gear change for the Great British Giveaway, and the biggest cash prize we've ever given away. Yes, £36,000 could be yours. That's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account each month for an entire year. Here's all the details that you'll need to make that money yours.
There's an incredible 13 on demand. Good luck.
Good luck. Right, still to come in the next hour. Do you remember Starmer's flagship migration policy, anybody?
I think the way to stop the boats is to smash the criminal gangs that are running the vile trade of putting people in the boats in the first place.
And it's in tatters, because tonight it's emerged that a damning report has found that the National Crime Agency, which is the force that will be needed to smash the gangs, is in crisis. Its ability to tackle people smuggling gangs has been severely hampered because they're losing more people than they are actually appointing to it. So what's next for Starmer's migration master plan? I'll be joined by the former Border Force Chief, Tony Smith, very soon. But up next, as the BBC is accused of breaking its editorial guidelines more than 1,500 times in its coverage of Israel-Hamas war, has the corporation's anti-Israel bias been well and truly exposed? Going head-to-head on this, former current affairs producer at the BBC, John Mayer, and the journalist Angela Epstein. Don't move.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With record temperatures expected this week, how do zoos keep their cooler creatures cold? Well, at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, the polar bears are enjoying a vegetable ice block.
Polar bears, they do have quite a variety of different temperatures that they naturally do find. Once they're moving off these polar ice caps, they are in the likes of down in the areas of Canada, Hudson Bay. Naturally, they were finding polar bears in 35-degree temperatures year upon year. So they are very much used to warm temperatures and heat waves as such. What you'll tend to find is they'll go for a good swim and then go for a snooze in the shade thereafter.
Not wanting to miss out, the sea lions are treated to a huge fish lolly.
In the hot weather, it's really important to give them ice because these guys, they don't drink salt water. These pools are actually saltwater pools. They actually drink fresh water. They've got 2 freshwater pools in their house, but again, being able to provide that in their outside enclosure is also really important. So offering them ice with their fish is not only enriching, but it's actually beneficial to their welfare as well.
Other animals like the lemurs will be basking in the sun, but also cooling down with frozen sweet potato.
So we've got 3 different species of lemur here. They come in all different shapes, colours, sizes, but they are native to Madagascar. Madagascar can get quite hot, understandably, so throughout the cold months here in Yorkshire, we do give them a nice heated house all year round, but especially making sure it's nice and warm in the winter for them. And it does mean that in the hot spells as well that we're able to keep our eyes on them and try and give them things that make them a bit more comfortable with that incoming hot weather as well.
The frozen food on offer here certainly has the seal of approval on what could be the hottest day of the year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight, and it is time now for our head-to-head. Yep, so a damning report has found that the BBC breached its own editorial guidelines more than 1,500 times during the height of the Israel-Hamas war, which is actually quite impressive in a way, isn't it? The report also found that the corporation massively downplayed Palestinian terrorism whilst presenting Israel as a military aggressor. Well, it's little wonder, given that the BBC's international editor Jeremy Bowen was forced to admit that he got it wrong when he suggested that Israel was responsible for the bombing of a Gaza hospital.
I think I was measured throughout. I didn't race to judgment.
But you said that building had been flattened.
Oh yeah, well I got that wrong because I was looking at the pictures and what I could see was a square that appeared to be flaming on all sides.
Yeah, I mean, just to add insult to injury, the Beeb still can't bring itself to call Hamas what they are, really, which is terrorists.
Let's start with the Islamist militant group that carried out this attack. Who are Hamas?
But more than 1,000 people have now been killed in Israel and Gaza after a massive attack by Hamas militants that began at dawn. Gaza is governed by Hamas, which is designated as a terrorist organisation by many governments, including the UK.
Hamas wears a lot of hats, doesn't it? It is a militant group, but it's also a political party and an Islamist movement.
Yeah, they try to do their best not to call them terrorists, don't they? So tonight I am asking, has the BBC shown its true colours? Let me know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. Tweet me at GBNews while you're there. Go and vote in our poll. Going head-to-head on this, the former current affairs producer at the BBC is John Mayer and the journalist Angela Epstein. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Angela, I'll come to you first on this. 1,500 breaches, you know, of their editorial guidelines within, I think it's been about 10 months. It's quite impressive in a way, isn't it? Has the BBC shown that it's got an institutional problem with Israel, do you think?
Well, it's very hard to be persuaded otherwise. And I say that very regretfully because this is our national broadcaster and they're bound by the Charter to deliver impartial reportage for us and to deliver information that we can trust. It's a brand that's known throughout the world and it has a huge responsibility that goes with that. This was a blistering report rather, produced by Trevor Assison. He's a brilliant lawyer with his colleagues. And I know there will be arguments to say, well, you know, maybe this was just one particular piece of research or how did they go about it? Apart from the fact the research itself holds up, you know, very robustly. This is just the latest in an egregious line of examples of the BBC showing manifest bias. You've shown the Bowen clip. He refuses to apologise. You've had Sir Michael Ellis, the former Attorney General, accusing the BBC of bias. There have been countless examples in BBC Arabic. You've got Gary Lineker, who's on the payroll, who has tweeted with impunity and seems to be invincible where this is concerned. And then there's the very basic stuff like Hamas. They maim, they brutalise, they murder, they behead, they burn. That's what they did on October 7th. The largest number of Jews were killed in that one day since the Holocaust. What more do you want? Their charter is dedicated to the destruction of Israel and world Jewry. And yet the BBC failed to say its name as it is. So all these things provide a damning dossier, make it very difficult to be persuaded otherwise that they're not biased.
John, I'll bring you in because I do believe that you have a different view here. I mean, just looking at the face of it, you know, if we breached editorial guidelines from Ofcom 1,500 times in 10 months, I mean, good grief, can you imagine the clamour?
Indeed. Now, Patrick, I'm amazed you don't have Rent-A-Gob Danny Cohen on tonight. He's written 28 Daily Telegraph articles in the last year about this. Now, look, this is not an objective report. It's a report by a biased person. And you know what? Oh, nobody's picked it up. It's in the Daily Telegraph yesterday, and nobody's picked it up. So the research can't be that solid, can it? Now,
I'll just stop you there for a second, because actually we did have the bloke who wrote that report on earlier. This is Trevor Assison. and he had it put to him that whether or not there was any bias towards the BBC in this. So I'll play you what he had to say, and then I'll get you to respond off the back of it. I think we've got a clip of it coming away very, very shortly now. This is a clip of Trevor Asserin, who was on with Jacob Rees-Mogg a little bit earlier on. He was asked whether or not there were any bias in this report. There we go.
What triggered the report was feeling that this story was not being told properly. And so I thought, well, I can't take anecdotal evidence of that. I've got to do it in the traditional way, which is methodically going through the evidence and assembling it and then seeing it. It took 4 months before we could actually start counting. And I was expecting to find a failure of balance and some impartiality, and I didn't. I found a total failure of balance, a colossal lack of impartiality.
And, John, apparently quite a lot of this was done by AI. So, I mean, why do you think it is incredibly biased?
So what? Now, let's talk about the Gaza war, shall we? Because it is a war. You know, this is a bizarre war.
Sorry, John, no. I want you to talk about whether or not the BBC has been institutionally biased against Israel.
It's not allowed to report it. It cannot go on the front line. It reports from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and it's not. And all of its material comes from the IDS. So I've watched a lot of the BBC. I've watched a lot of Channel 4 News. I've watched a lot of ITV, and I think it's a very proud moment in British journalism what they've done. They've kept themselves very objective. But this is a war which they're not allowed to report. This is the first war where journalists are not allowed on the front line. Why is that? You know, what are the Israelis playing at? You know, being anti-Israel or anti this war is not being anti-Semitic. Let's understand that.
So, John, just to be clear, you are completely dismissing the findings of this report, yeah?
Well, I haven't read the report, but I've read the report of the report.
Well, thanks for coming on, John. Great to have you. I mean, you've had all day to...
very much, Patrick.
Well, all right, go on, Angela.
So, John, he hasn't read the report, so for somebody who's a former...
Have you read the whole report?
Yes, I have. I have read the report, actually.
Give me a 30-second summary. What does it say?
But, well, as Patrick said in his introduction, it shows 1,500 breaches of editorial guidelines and proper editorial policy. It also shows that there isn't any kind of mechanism by which the neutrality can be approached within the BBC. And it gives many, many egregious examples of the disproportionate use of the word genocide in relation to Israel compared to Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation. I can go on, but I'm aware that we're short of time. I'm very surprised that, excuse me, I haven't finished. I'm very surprised that somebody who worked for the BBC, who was a journalist, will come on this programme to state their position without bothering to read the evidence. I think that very poorly reflects the robust nature of your position. But more importantly, I would say simply this. Trevor Asserin, he's a highly respected lawyer. He's got a very successful law practice. He's worked in the UK. There's nothing to be gained by falsifying further. And even if you set that aside, over 200 people that work for the BBC signed a letter recently complaining about institutionalized bias within the corporation. Okay. What more do you need to prove that there is a problem that needs to be addressed?
All right, John, I'll let you come back to that.
Now, look, I mean, this report, a biased report by a biased person.
But how do you know, John? You've not read it, have you?
And look, it's interesting that nobody has picked up on it apart from the Daily Telegraph and Danny Cohen.
John, you've not even read it, mate. I mean,
how important is this? Look, when are the Israelis going to allow the Gaza war to be reported properly? When are they going to allow journalists on the front line to get there and see what's happening? They can be, at the moment, I mean, Hamas is indulging in propaganda as much as the Israelis are, because they can send any old film out and people show it. Now, this is a silent war, and it's an absolute nonsense what the Israelis are doing.
Right, John, can I just say, look, as a former current affairs producer at the BBC, right, would it be acceptable, do you think, if a member of your staff or a presenter had come on to discuss a report and not read it?
I know what the report says. I read a very long piece in the Daily Telegraph, and I read Danny Cohen's diatribe about it as well. So I don't need to read it word for word. It's one of. I mean, let's talk about the Gaza war. Let's talk. Being anti-Israeli is not being anti.
Right. Look, John, we're out of time. Yeah, look, both of you, thank you very much.
Pity because,
well, it's not a pity, John. I'm sorry, mate, but you were brought on to talk about a report. You've openly said you're not bothered to read it, but you've jumped to all kinds of conclusions to it. And, I think that's a bit arrogant, to be honest with you. So we are going to. It's massively arrogant, actually. We're going to have to knock it on the head. So thank you very much, both of you, for your time. There's John Mayer, there's former current affairs producer at the BBC, and Angela Epstein as well, a journalist. So who do you agree with there? Although it's quite difficult if one side of that debate has decided not to engage, isn't it? But anyway, your verdict is now in. 96% of you think that the BBC is anti-Israel, while 4% of you think the BBC is not. Coming up, the NHS is in decline for the first time in 50 years. That's the conclusion of a damning new report. I don't imagine John's read that one either. So will Labour be able to turn the tide and deliver on the promise to reform our crumbling health service? Former Labour advisor James Matthewson thinks they can, and he'll join me live very, very shortly. But first, do you remember this?
I think the way to stop the boats is to smash the criminal gangs that are running the vile trade of putting people in the boats in the first place.
Well, the Prime Minister's going to need a new migration master plan, really, because it's emerged, due to a shocking new finding, that the National Crime Agency is, quote, in crisis, with its ability to tackle the people smuggling gangs severely hampered. So what happens next? Former Border Force Chief Tony Smith has got the inside track. He joins me live.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some clear spells overnight and a cool night compared with recent nights, but it is turning increasingly unsettled towards the north of the UK, with weather systems arriving from the Atlantic. It's not something we've seen for a week or so, and that means heavy and at times persistent rain across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales through the night. Cloudy skies sinking south as well, but we keep some clear spells towards the East Midlands, East Anglia, South East England. 11 or 12 Celsius first thing here, but high single figures, low double figures typically elsewhere, and lower humidity compared with the last week or so. So a more comfortable night for sleeping, even if it is an unsettled start to Tuesday with wet and windy weather sweeping through northern Scotland. I think Shetland and Orkney could see some disruption from heavy rain and strong winds during the day, as well as blustery weather for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, heavy showers and gusty winds. An area of rain sinks south during the morning across northern England, reaching North Wales and parts of the Midlands by lunchtime. Ahead of that, we've got thickening cloud for southern parts, with a few showers moving into Wales in the southwest, perhaps one or two developing later in the southeast. So effectively, it's a showery day, but with some longer spells of rain at times, for example, the end of the day across southern parts. 19 Celsius in the south, 11 in the far north and northeast, with 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and the wind coming from the Arctic. Now, that Arctic wind is going to sweep across all parts by Wednesday. That means it's going to feel cold in the wind, unusually so for the time of year. Frequent showers moving through as well, particularly in the north and northwest, but some sunshine in between, so it's not going to be a complete washout. Fewer showers on Thursday and Friday, more rain in the north this weekend.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Now, today, the Prime Minister has been warned that the National Crime Agency is, quote, on its knees and severely hobbled in its ability to tackle the people smuggling gang. So that's the conclusion of a pretty damning report published earlier. The NCA was expected to play a key role in Sir Keir Starmer's plan to smash the people smuggling gangs and tackle the small boats crisis. But with reports of apparently unprecedented brain drain and significant lack of investments, the Prime Minister's plan is tonight lying in tatters. Meanwhile, the government can't even come clean, and this is important, they can't even come clean about where illegal migrants that keep crossing the Channel on a daily basis will actually be housed.
Give you some ground on this
Home
one.
Secretary
Let's
is
say
marshalling that effort across government so we can actually make it work.
Asylum seeker is approved. Where does that individual go? Would it be in a council house?
Well, arrangements will have to be made to accommodate people who successfully are processed through the asylum arrangements.
Yes, it's quite astonishing, really, isn't it? So, you know, in order to smash the gangs, which Keir Starmer kept telling us was one of his top priorities, he needed first a new head of border command. That is yet to materialise. OK? The other thing you need is the National Crime Agency. Now, it's turned out that apparently the National Crime Agency has got some of the lowest morale of any public sector whatsoever. Supposedly, they are paid less than, you know, your average kind of senior police officer, despite the fact that they do a lot of very controversial, very in-depth, very high-profile work. So that's a problem. And apparently, more people are leaving than they're managing to employ, which, again, is another massive issue. So if you are actually going to stop the boats, how does that square off? And we were hoping to have the former head of Border Force UK, Tony Smith, but unfortunately there's a couple of issues with him. So we've managed to rope in at the last minute a familiar face. It's Benjamin Butterworth, who's back for more. Benjamin, thank you very, very much. Look, it doesn't really matter which way you dress this up, to be fair, does it? If the National Crime Agency is, quote, hobbled and on its knees, we ain't smashing the gangs, are we?
Well, I mean, look, if it's on its knees, then I think the idea of blaming Keir Starmer is quite unreasonable because clearly that's been happening for a while. But surely this shows how the issue of tackling these boats, of tackling the most evil people that it's possible to exist, these smugglers that take advantage of some of the most desperate or vulnerable or, in some cases, maybe opportunistic people, is utterly evil. And so to have this in crisis while those people are exploiting it maybe tells us a story of why we have as hundreds of people a day coming across over summers.
So I suppose the question's of priorities, though, isn't it? Because, you know, if he's there, you know, ticking off the union paymasters, if he's doing a few bits and bobs like that, you know, you would have thought that actually he would have really got to grips with this. I mean, he could have made this his key piece. He could have gone, right, we're going to give you guys a pay rise at the NCA, we're going to keep you in there. Apparently people are just leaving because they can get much more lucrative work in the private sector as well. He's not even appointed a head of border command, has he? You know, and meanwhile the boats keep coming.
Well, I mean, look, I think they're looking for a head of border command. I know the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has talked about the fact that they're searching for that, but then they had a blow that someone with a similar job in the Home Office actually quit that role. But look, I think it's a really important point here. You know, when you've got this brain drain, when you say, and this report says, that people are leaving for better paid jobs in the private sector, well, that's because public sector jobs, particularly in the last couple of years, have seen such poor cost, such poor inflation in the salaries they get. You know, there was something recently where a head of negotiations for an Eastern European country with Britain in our civil service, and the pay was 35 grand. You know, we don't pay public servants strong enough. And when Keir Starmer is putting up the salaries of public sector workers and it's the outrage, actually, I think we should pay civil servants more. Then maybe you'd have someone capable of smashing the gangs.
You know, one thing I do think that isn't spoken about enough, right? We talk a lot about, you know, Britain's colonial past and the wrongs of the slave trade, and that we all maybe need to pay some kind of reparations and flagellate ourselves endlessly as a result of it. But we have a slave trade taking place right now, a trade in human beings. And very often that is done by people who are not British, who are, whether they're Middle Eastern gangs or whatever they are, who are literally, before our very eyes, currently dealing in the trade of human beings across the Channel. And I just wonder whether or not Keir Starmer takes that as seriously as the Labour Party takes some historical wrongs that Britain may or may not have done.
Well, the number of slaves in the world is higher today than it's ever been, which is one of the most
Who's
shocking
trading in
statistics.
those people?
Well, we know that human trafficking, exploiting of in gangs. So one of the ways they do is that they come over in boats. And lots of people point out they spend like up to £10,000 it can cost to get a seat on one of those dangerous dinghies coming into the channel. But they don't always have that money. When they get here, they are then told they can repay it by working, sometimes often illegally, in our country. So I think national ID cards would be a way to solve that. But let's be honest here. It was the last Tory government who said they wanted to get rid of elements of the Modern Slavery Act introduced by Theresa May as Home Secretary and as Prime Minister because they thought it was letting these people in. And I think that's the wrong way to do it, because some of these people coming over in boats, yes, it costs thousands of pounds, but they're paying that back and being slaves on Britain's shores.
I do get it, but for me, it's, it's all very well and good the likes of Sadiq Khan saying, we're going to unveil a new statue to commemorate the historic wrongs of the transatlantic slave trade. But if you just go and stand over the White Cliffs of Dover, you can see people who are non-British nationals every single day literally doing exactly the same thing, and that is happening right now. We seem to care more about what may or may not have happened before any of us were born, but anyway, there we go. But Andrew, thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute, much appreciated. Coming up, there is trouble brewing for Sir Keir Starmer, with more than 30 Labour MPs ready to rebel, apparently, against the government's winter fuel payment cut. It's going to be a big story this tomorrow, huge, OK? Winter fuel payment cut. It's warnings now that 4,000 pensioners could die this winter, OK? So why won't Starmer U-turn on it? I'm going to tackle that at 10. Oh, and fantastic news from the Palace this evening.
Do you lead the way? As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment.
Yeah, we'll have all the very latest on the Princess of Wales' latest health update very, very soon. But next, apparently the NHS is now in decline for the first time in 50 years. What's that I can hear you saying? What's that? It's always been in decline. I know, but apparently now it's official. So, do you trust Labour to fix our broken health service? Don't go anywhere.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are non-crime hate incidents a breach of your human rights?
It's crazy, isn't it? Freedom of speech is now on life support here, and we've had, in the last week alone, we've had Elon Musk being threatened. He's now out of Brazil with X. We've had the founder of Telegram basically being arrested, and he's been charged in France. We're not quite sure the circumstances why he was there, whether Macron invited him to the Olympics or whatever, but he's been arrested under several charges. And we've had all sorts of people who've been speaking out are basically being shut down. So it has to be freedom of thought. It has to be freedom of expression. It's one of our fundamental rights under the Human Rights Act of 1998. Article 10 gives you the right to express your opinion and also to air that publicly.
It's basically I say something that somebody doesn't like, so probably one of my monologues. Then somebody can then inform the police that I've upset them in some way. And then that goes on my record, so I now have a criminal record. Because somebody else who I've never met, who's never met me, has heard something that upset or hurt your feelings. Then if I go for a certain job or I go for my DBS check, which I do regularly because I go and talk in schools, somebody could pull that up and go, well, you did something that had hurty feelings, and so now you can't have that job. That has got to be a breach of my human rights.
Oh, it's absolutely. Article 10, it's a fundamental right to protect your freedom of speech and so on and so forth. And this is what's really worrying, because it's happening around the world, as I say, in Brazil, in France, in various other countries. In America, Zuckerberg, he came out in the last few days and said the pressure that he was put under by the Biden administration, first of all about COVID, and even jokes he was told to suppress them. The other thing that he was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And he said he couldn't speak about that because they were telling him not to. And what he did, he had to fact check, and he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. OK, so NHS, apparently, the progress, if you want to call it that, is going backwards for the first time in 50 years, with failures in the most basic areas of the health service. That is the conclusion of a major report by the surgeon and former health minister, Lord Darzi. So speaking to GB News yesterday, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, put reforming the NHS at the heart of his plan to fix what is clearly a failing health service.
My reform agenda is about 3 big shifts out of hospital into the community. So we get the GP appointments that people need, the social care that people need, care closer to people's homes, better for patients, better value for taxpayers. It's a shift from...
Yeah, all right, I mean, words, isn't it? Meanwhile, people die. I'm joined now by former Labour advisor James Matthewson. James, look, thank you very, very much. I know a lot of people will be at home thinking, well, hang on a minute, I thought the NHS had actually been in decline for about 50 years, not for the first time in 50 years. But what are Labour going to do to actually fix this, other than just lob a load more money at it?
Well, money is one thing, Patrick. It is, I know people think cynically like you can't fix everything with money, which is correct. You can't fix everything with money, but money is a huge part of the problem, and it's been chronically underfunded, as we saw. I mean, we are still seeing the effects. The damaging effects of austerity after David Cameron, George Osborne came to power have long-lasting effects. Policies in government, as we know, take time. And this is why I always find it funny, whether it's on the left or the right, people who attack incoming governments for the immediate problems that they're presented with, whether it be Donald Trump being blamed for a lapse in the economy, it works both ways, really. So I do think we have to say this is the effect of years and years of underfunding.
I get that, but James, is it not also the effect of the fact that we've got an NHS chief executive, which why we really need that role, for example, when we have a health minister as well, I don't know. But where's their accountability? There's a leadership team in NHS England. All right, there's loads of people. I shudder to think what amount of money they're on. Does anyone ever hold this lot to account? It's always just politicians who get the blame for everything. I mean, what are these people doing?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the politicians direct these people. So I think our system of democracy works in the sense that, we blame politicians, we hold them to account because we can vote for them and we can change for them. We can't get rid of these people. We can't get rid of CEOs of the NHS. We can't get rid of civil servants. That's just the way that it works. And the whole point is that they can work full time on these projects. They are the experts, but it is a bit top down. You've got Wes Streeting instructing these people when you think about it, they are the experts at the end of the day compared to Wes Streeting. So it is, there are nuances in our system that require tweaks to make them better than they are now.
But you'd sack them though, wouldn't you, James? You would, if you were running a business, right? If you were running a business, which is, well, let's just say the NHS might as well be, right? And you were having the failures at every single level, from the most basic care right down to people who need urgent heart surgery, and you had a team, I would go as far as to call them a fleet of people in very senior roles here, and you were seeing those kind of results on a spreadsheet, you would sack them, wouldn't you?
I don't think it's as straightforward as sacking them, but disciplinary processes and, people being actually held to account on targets are important. But let's not forget, targets cause half of these problems. I think when we hold people to targets, we lose the actual reality that they're there to provide a service that is not cost effective, because our health is not cost effective, and it can never be cost effective because it's never going to be, and it shouldn't be looked at in such a way. So it's difficult to compare to a private sector that puts profit above all that.
I agree that it should be, mate, and I do agree with you on that. But you've got people like Richard Meddings, apparently, who joined the board of the NHS chair back in March 2022. His previous roles at Standard Chartered, Barclays, apparently, TSB Bank, I mean, he's a finance guy, Deutsche Bank. You know, I mean, if they say we don't want to run it like a business, he's a finance dude, right? I mean, there's no way he'd survive with these kind of results in his previous employ. But I'm going to whiz us on to a different topic now, because parents in Buckinghamshire have been asked to provide evidence that they can no longer afford private school fees to secure a place at a state school. Now, there are a couple of problems here, because some of the people, for example, have children who've got special educational needs, all right? And there's one case of a woman who says that a daughter had been rejected from 2 local secondary schools. She was asked to prove her financial situation in order for her child to be considered for another school in the area. She actually was speaking to GB News yesterday, I should say. West Streeting just had little sympathy for parents like that.
Schools can't say they weren't warned. We did make it very clear. And the priority for this money is to invest in the state education that benefits the 93% of pupils in this country, including the most vulnerable and disadvantaged. So that's the thrust of the policy. That's the government's agenda. It's for the 93% at state schools, not simply the 7% at independent schools. And people were forewarned, so they can't complain now.
Forewarned but can't complain now. You've got a child with special needs. There's military children as well who are normally, you know, dotted around the country in schools. You know, why doesn't Labour care about them?
I think they do care about them. I think Wes Streeting misspoke in that. I mean, can't speak for him. Me and Wes aren't traditionally on the same side of the Labour Party anyway, but I do think what he was talking about were the schools, because the schools have been forewarned. And I think we need to lie the blame where it belongs, which, as you were just talking about businesses a minute ago, Patrick, by the way, businesses need to be responsible for their finances. And these are businesses. They're schools that provide an education, but they're not beholden to the curriculum. They're not beholden to any kind of, national regulation.
Ultimately, if it is disproportionately children with special needs or children on bursaries or the children of people who are serving in our armed forces who are suffering, I would argue that's a bad policy.
Yeah, I don't think it is disproportionately that. I think there are cases where those people are, but those people are being let down anyway, because SEND provision is in a complete state across the country. You know, it should be state provided. I know counties like the county I come from in Northumberland, rural Northumberland, you have to drive 2 hours if you want to go to an SEND school. Because there's no other spaces for them available. So that's a problem, and that's been picked up by the private sector, as many problems always are. But that does not mean the private sector gets off the hook when it comes to paying tax.
All right. James, look, thank you very much for your time. As ever, you take care. James Matthewson there, former Labour advisor. Right, coming up, some of these violent thugs could be released onto your streets tomorrow. It's all part of the government's plan to ease the overcrowding crisis in the UK's prisons. But could the release of 1,700 violent criminals put Brits in danger? Also coming up tonight, different tone, thankfully, apparently some fantastic news from Kensington Palace.
You lead the way. As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment.
Well, I'll bring you all of the latest on the Princess of Wales health update very, very soon. And with warnings that more than 4,000 pensioners could freeze to death this winter, why isn't Keir Starmer U-turning on the winter fuel payments? Stay tuned.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some clear spells overnight and a cool night compared with recent nights, but it is turning increasingly unsettled towards the north of the UK, with weather systems arriving from the Atlantic. It's not something we've seen for a week or so, and that means heavy and at times persistent rain across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales through the night. Cloudy skies sinking south as well, but we'll keep some clear spells towards the East Midlands, East Anglia, South East England. 11 or 12 Celsius first thing here, but high single figures, low double figures typically elsewhere, and lower humidity compared with the last week or so. So a more comfortable night for sleeping, even if it is an unsettled start to Tuesday with wet and windy weather sweeping through northern Scotland. I think Shetland and Orkney could see some disruption from heavy rain and strong winds during the day. as well as blustery weather for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, heavy showers and gusty winds. An area of rain sinks south during the morning across northern England, reaching North Wales and parts of the Midlands by lunchtime. Ahead of that, we've got thickening cloud for southern parts, with a few showers moving into Wales and the southwest, perhaps one or two developing later in the southeast. So effectively, it's a showery day, but with some longer spells of rain at times, for example, the end of the day across southern parts. 19 Celsius in the south, 11 in the far north and northeast with 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and the wind coming from the Arctic. Now, that Arctic wind is going to sweep across all parts by Wednesday. That means it's going to feel cold in the wind, unusually so for the time of year. Frequent showers moving through as well, particularly in the north and northwest, but some sunshine in between, so it's not going to be a complete washout. Fewer showers on Thursday and Friday, more rain in the north this weekend.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
Last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners.
We're going to have to be unpopular. Popular decisions aren't tough, they're easy.
Exposed. The two faces of Sir Keir Starmer.
I'm not remotely happy about it, and I'm not remotely happy about having to say to some of my constituents, I'm sorry that I'm going into work this week to vote for something that will take money away from you.
It's not just money. 4,000 pensioners are set to die this winter as Starmer faces a backbench rebellion over cruelly cutting winter fuel payments. And around 2,000 violent thugs, maybe even sex offenders and terrorists, could be released tomorrow onto the streets of lawless Britain. Also,
doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus.
Princess Catherine gives a positive, if at times slightly concerning, health update. I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. The Express columnist Carol Malone, ex-Tory party chairman Sir Jake Berry, and journalist Benjamin Butterworth. Oh, and what's the story behind this clip?
Down it, down it, down it, down it, quick.
Yes, he joins me later on in the show to reveal all. Get ready, Britain, here we go. Will Starmer let old people freeze to death this winter? Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wenslow with your headlines just after 10 o'clock. The Chancellor has warned about difficult decisions to come on tax and spending cuts during a meeting with Labour MPs. Rachel Reeves also told MPs that she is not immune to concerns over winter fuel allowance plans. Earlier, Downing Street said Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet is united behind plans to cut winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. It comes as two of the biggest unions have put further pressure on the government to soften its policy. MPs will vote tomorrow on plans to scrap the payment. In other news, a man who raped and stabbed Joanne Tulip 60 times in a sadistic murder in Northumberland 27 years ago should be freed from prison. That's according to the parole board. Stephen Ling was jailed for life in December 1998 after admitting his horrific attack on Joanne, who was 29 years old. Ling was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 20 years, which was reduced to 18 years by the High Court. Transport Secretary Louise Hay said her thoughts are with Joanne's family.
First and foremost, all my thoughts are with Joanne Tulip's family and everyone who loved her. This is an appalling situation for them to have lived through and now be worrying about. I know the Justice Secretary is considering whether that decision can be appealed and whether it can be reconsidered, whether she can request for the parole board to reconsider it, but it is an independent parole board.
It comes as victims of domestic abuse are facing sleepless nights ahead of Labour's early prison release scheme. That's according to the Domestic Abuse Commissioner. Speaking to the Sunday Times, Nicole Jacobs warned that some victims may not be aware that their attackers could soon be free. Up to 1,750 offenders will be released tomorrow under the Ministry of Justice's emergency plan to ease the overcrowding crisis in jails. In other news, the Princess of Wales has finished her chemotherapy treatment and said her focus is to stay cancer-free. She made the announcement in a heartfelt family video showing her spending private time with Prince William and her children. Princess Catherine revealed in March that she was undergoing cancer treatment and has been out of the public view since then. She is now set to carry out a few engagements this year, which could include remembrance events in November and her annual Christmas Carol concert. Now, some breaking news. Hollywood legend James Earl Jones has died at the age of 93. The actor was best known for his roles as Darth Vader in Star Wars and the voice of Mufasa in Disney's The Lion King, and he died at his home in New York this morning. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. Now it's back to Patrick.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Is Keir Starmer happy for nearly 4,000 old people to die this winter because of a decision he's made? Starmer took the knee for Black Lives Matter. So did Angela Rayner. The Home Secretary poses with a sign saying refugees welcome. We absolutely have to keep sending billions of pounds to Ukraine. Labour is obsessed with the lives of Palestinian people. But a report done by the Labour Party predicts nearly 4,000 elderly people right here in Britain could die here if Starmer scraps the winter fuel allowance. Will he take the knee for them? Well, he's down there. Maybe he could turn the heating on. Starmer's doing this to save the taxpayer money, is he? Well, that's funny, because the taxpayer isn't allowed to know how much money we're spending on refurbishing flats for asylum seekers. Apparently that information is too sensitive. If the truth was out there, there might be protests, and obviously we can't have that, can we? There's layers to Starmer's pensioner problem. There's hypocrisy.
Last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. His Paymaster General went a step further. He said these are the sorts of things that we need to look at. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them to help fund his £46 billion black hole?
How times change. There's the fact that he's lost the unions over this. The head of the Trade Union Congress, Paul Novak, said...
I think we've got real concerns about this decision to take those winter fuel allowance payments away from pensioners, Kay. I don't want any pensioner going into the winter worried about putting the heating on.
There's a backbench revolt looming. As many as 50 Labour MPs could abstain from the vote tomorrow, but Starmer doesn't seem to care. He's not backing down.
Willing to be unpopular. We're going to have to be unpopular. Popular decisions aren't tough, they're easy. When we talk about tough decisions, I'm talking about tough decisions, the things the last government ran away from.
I wonder if he's changed his hair lighter to look a bit more like Jack Frost this winter. But anyway, will he remove the whip, though, from the 17 Labour MPs that have tonight signed a motion opposing the cut? He's already removed the whip from 7 MPs who voted to abolish the two-child benefit cap. It looks like his own cabinet don't really want to vote with him on this.
But I'm not remotely happy about it, and I'm not remotely happy about having to say to some of my constituents, I'm sorry that I'm going into work this week to vote for something that will take money away from you.
They're going to do it anyway, though, are they? Ethnic minorities, illegal immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, the unions, Gaza, people who didn't get tickets to Oasis, Ukraine, EU diplomats, all of those people are more of a priority to Sir Keir Starmer than the vulnerable elderly, are they? He'll deny that, of course, but that's how it looks, isn't it? Let's get the thoughts from our panel this evening. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone. We've got journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth and the former chairman of the Conservative Party, Sir Jake Berry. Carol, remarkable this, really. I mean, are pensioners just back of the queue in Keir Starmer's Britain?
It is beyond shocking that this is the man who kept on telling us before the election that he was going to look after Britain's most vulnerable, that the Labour Party was the party to do that. But yet he appears to hate old people. I wonder if he's punished them because he thought most of them voted Tory in the election. However, that's beside the point. The point here is pensioners are some of the most vulnerable in our society. And, you know, when Theresa May was going to do this, and you mentioned in your intro back in 2017, he said it would be the single biggest attack on pensioners in a generation. So why is he doing exactly the same thing? You know, and the fact that his own party is totally against him on this, the fact that the union baron Sharon Graham today, who was in charge of the Unite union, the biggest union in the country, she just said real leaders are about people who know they've made the wrong decision and they have the guts to put it right. And that's really important here because he's not doing that. And you know, the reason he can't do it is Rachel Reeves, because I will bet she is telling him he can't backtrack because it makes her look foolish and heartless and callous if he says that one of her policies is no good and U-turn. So he won't U-turn.
It's interesting, this. So this has just landed in the last few minutes, all right? I'm going to bring this to you now. Apparently, Chancellor Rachel Reeves received, quotes, prolonged clapping and cheering from Labour MPs after their meeting earlier on the winter fuel payment cuts. I'm keen to see what reaction she gets on the doorstep the next time she meets pensioners. Benjamin, you know, a report that was conducted by the Labour Party itself saying that nearly 4,000 elderly people could die if the winter fuel payment is cut, and Keir Starmer's going to do it anyway. Can he live with that?
Well, I suspect that didn't take into account what they're doing this time, which is that people on pension credit will still get it. And so the poorest will continue to get it.
880,000 are eligible for pension credit and can't get it.
And that's important that they get it, but they're eligible.
They're not getting it.
Now, I think it's absolutely right that they don't get these winter bonuses going forward. The idea that we have a situation where millions of the most financially secure, wealthiest people in society get a 300... I didn't interrupt you. Get a £300 payout each summer, while there are sky-high taxes for workers who have much less income, is completely unjustifiable and economically unsustainable. And don't just take my word for that. Kemi Badenoch said that while in government.
So why did the Labour Party introduce it then?
Well, good question. Because back when they introduced it, the gap between the earnings of the average pensioner was 30% lower than the average worker. Today, it's less than a tenth difference. You know, in the last 14 years, there has been a bigger increase for the incomes and wealth of pensioners than any other group.
As I'd say, the Tories, the Conservative government looked after the most vulnerable people in society. You've now got a Labour government isn't doing the same. What I think is surprising about this, it is not the only thing that's happening to pensions.
You live on 200.
We are hearing.
You don't.
I have.
All right, stop.
We are hearing that Rachel Reeves may abolish a single person's discount on council tax or reduce it. That is disproportionately going to affect pensioners. We'll have to wait till the budget to find it. It's being heavily pushed out there by Treasury officials. Of course, the cost of fuel, because the fuel cap's been altered, has gone up £300 anyway. So if you put that £300 with the £300 they've lost, that's pensioners £600 worse off this winter, unable to heat their house. It really is a concern. And the Labour Party were right. The reason the Conservatives kept this year after year, election after election, is because poor people, elderly people, will die.
Okay.
You can shake your head and say no. That's what the Labour Party used to believe in when it was in opposition.
Yes, it did.
Now, it's so desperate to get our cash so it can give money to its mates in the trade unions, its real paymasters.
2017 Labour
It's abolishing it.
was because it was profligate with money, and now it's not.
I'm sorry, pensioners should not be in the position to have to plead and beg and justify for money and be means-tested for money that is not a handout to them. This is money they've paid into the state all of their lives. And all those groups that Patrick mentioned before have not paid into our state and have not done their bit for this country. These people haven't. Have to beg at this stage in their life. They should, and pensioners should not be frightened to be able to turn the heating on.
Let me just put this to you, Benjamin, right? That we are currently, and there are echoes here of when we tried and failed to find very basic information about what crimes and how many crimes are being committed by asylum seekers and refugees and illegal migrants. It was banned from us. It was deemed to be too sensitive for the poor public's ears. We couldn't possibly know that information. That would be terrible. We would implode as a society. And now we're being told we can't possibly know how much taxpayers' money is being spent refurbishing flats for asylum seekers. We can't know that, but what we can know is that apparently there'd be a run on the pound if we didn't take the winter fuel payments away from
Do you know how much that's going to save the economy? £1.2 billion.
1.6,
and the public sector wage bill, the wage rises, is going to be
Well, forget that.
billion.
What we do know is we've got billions of pounds worth of foreign aid going to countries like India that has its own space programme. It's going to China while we're letting pensioners freeze to death at home.
And I say this from deep personal experience, you're about to be very unpopular with Indian Twitter, but yes, I do agree with you.
Well, first of all, the idea about... They should say how much it costs to refurbish homes, but you're referring to is one property. It's not a rule of the government by any means, so it's an exaggeration. It is a perversion of the state, and it is not conservative in the slightest to say that we should take £300 from workers that are having a hard time and have the highest taxes ever and give them to millions of people, 12.5 million pensioners.
Why
the vast
do you hate
majority
pensioners?
are financially
secure. You always
secure.
talk about
it is
the elderly
absurd.
like this. You talk about the elderly all the time. You talk like you hate elderly people.
I don't hate elderly people at all. I was raised by them. But the fact is that it is not a sensible thing to give all of this money to people that don't need it.
The Labour government...
Pensioners' incomes and their security is out of proportion with 30 years ago. They are doing well.
The truth is, the Labour government won the last general election, record majority, fantastic result, without the vote of pensioners, because most of them voted Conservative Party.
And I think this is a spike.
They know that. They think they don't need you. If you're a pensioner watching at home, Labour does not need you. That is what they've decided. They're a soft target. And they're hitting them.
And hang on, because you're not going to keep shouting over us all the time. Stop it. You're just shouting. No, you are shouting.
And by the way, on the issue of India, let me go back to that. We're giving India £50 million a year of taxpayers' cash. They spent the same sending a rocket to the moon, and pensioners are freezing at home. What on earth are we doing in this country?
About pensioners' rich life. 221 quid.
That's not correct.
That is correct.
It is not correct.
Hey, I get a pension. I know what the pension is. You do not talk to me about what the pension is.
But you also know that's not the pension you get.
It's £221 a week.
Because 7 in 10 pensioners have a private pension.
Let me tell you.
The average income of a pensioner in this country is £21,000.
Of the people in this country have got nothing else but the state.
That's correct. That's correct. And those people are eligible for pension credit. They're eligible for the winter fuel allowance. They're eligible for the free TV licence. So they're not affected by this.
Millions of pensioners earn a small income that is just above the criteria.
How can it be justifiable that we give £1 billion to 70% of wealthier pensioners?
Keep your hatred of old people to yourself. We don't want to hear it.
Because seriously, what Keir Starmer cannot get around is, as of right now, we're going to have a vote on this tomorrow. We'll see which way that goes. Remains to be seen what he does about removing the whip for people who vote against him or indeed abstain or whatever happens. So obviously we'll bring that to you live, I imagine, really, here as that happens. But as it currently stands in Britain, we've got a bill running into the billions of pounds for people who have just entered Britain illegally. We have a bill of around £8 billion for migrants who are not working or indeed looking for work.
Exactly.
Whereas pensioners are about to take a hit. And that doesn't seem fair, Carol.
It's totally not fair. So these are people who have contributed to society all of their lives. And, you know, he has no idea about the mentality of old people. He's probably never interviewed one in his life.
I was raised by pensioners.
Yes, quite a wealthy one. I've actually spent my life interviewing pensioners. And the bottom line is they care, they save, they try and keep a little nest egg because they never know what's going to happen to them. And when I say a nest egg, I'm not talking about tens of thousands of pounds. I'm talking about £2,000 or £3,000 because they never know what's going to befall. They never want to be reliant on the state. And yet you're talking about making those pensions...
And they're being punished
now.
They're being punished by Labour for doing the right thing.
No, it's a reality check. Look, let's look at a fact. Poverty, relative poverty, is higher among workers than among pensioners. And yet those workers are facing sky-high taxes and very difficult to get the security of a home. They are. We have the highest taxes in 70 years.
Sorry, but the workers you're talking about are not facing sky-high taxes.
Should you have workers pay even higher taxes when pensioners... Now, they have seen...
Well, if a worker had the same as the state pension, they wouldn't pay any tax at all. They wouldn't pay any income tax. With sky-high taxes of zero.
Which is a third more than...
You're talking about the triple lock. And every year that they get more on the triple lock...
You got £900 more last year.
Food prices rise.
And let's just point out, they get £400 more in the triple lock this year.
That's enough. We are
which keeps pace with inflation. They're not any richer.
So you're getting richer.
No, you're not.
They're not.
Right, it's time for the Great British Giveaway, everybody. If you're a pensioner... no, all right, OK. It's time for the Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest cash prize we've ever given away. £36,000 could be all yours. That's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account each month for an entire year. Here's all the details you need to make it yours.
Designating on demand. Good luck.
Good luck indeed. Coming up, I'll have all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages with my panel of experts and a positive, I know, I don't write that. A positive, if I must say, at times slightly concerning health update from the Princess of Wales tonight.
Doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus.
Yeah, bless her. Well, I'll bring you all the very latest on Princess Catherine's cancer treatment. But first, more than 1,600 potentially violent criminals are set to be released onto the UK streets tomorrow as part of the government's plan to ease prison overcrowding. So, will Brits be put in danger? I'll be joined by former prisons governor. That's next.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Many happy memories, and 9 in 10 Brits say certain foods evoke feelings of childhood nostalgia, with the mousse-like powdered dessert, Angel Delight, the most loved. Joining us now...
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, what, Angel Delight?
I'm surprised it's number one. Yes, very surprised. Well, to talk us through all of this is creator of the Crazy Sexy Food podcast, Hannah Harley-Young. Morning.
Hi.
I've brought a selection of things that really define my childhood, particularly the Viennetta ice cream. And I have brought you some butterscotch Angel Delight.
Yay!
I'm going to expose myself live on camera and say that I've never tried Angel Delight.
Hannah?
I know. I don't know what that says about me.
I thought that was apple puree, actually. I'm so excited. Is it good? Here we go.
My goodness.
Did I make it okay?
Oh, yeah. But to be fair, Hannah, it's not that hard to make.
What is it, though? That's what's so funny about Angel Delight.
It's chemicals, isn't it? It's just chemicals in a bag.
I mean, it's a load of additives, which, I mean, one thing that's also really interesting about all these nostalgic foods when you look at them is that a lot of things have been discontinued over the years.
Oh, dear.
So it makes you wonder, how did this one kind of get through the cracks?
Angel Delight came out #1, didn't it?
It did come out as #1. And also sort of in the top 5 was fish and chips, something I still eat today. Fish fingers, still a staple of my diet. Mr. Whippy, in that same survey, they said that 95% of people find that a taste from their childhood will take them back more than looking at a photo. And that's something that's really interesting for me, and it's the basis of everything that I do, and the reason really why I set up Crazy Sexy Food, or one of the reasons, should I say, was that I love this concept of memories of food. You know, I've interviewed hundreds of people over the past 5 years, and when I get to that question, you actually see their face relaxing, and there's something that it evokes emotion.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, around 2,000 criminals are set to be released tomorrow, and they're going to be released early from prison. It's an attempt to tackle overcrowding in British jails. So the offenders identified for the first group of early releases are all serving sentences of less than 5 years. But campaigners have raised fears that domestic abusers could be one of the largest groups of people released under this scheme. Warnings now that victims will be having sleepless nights as a result of this, as you can imagine. Can't you really? Now, bizarrely, the government has claimed that the policy is necessary to stop the complete breakdown of society. I mean, exactly why and how releasing more criminals onto the street makes society a safer place, I'm not entirely sure. But luckily for us, here is Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood trying to make that case back in July.
We could see looters running amok, smashing in windows, robbing shops and setting neighbourhoods alight. In short, if we fail to act now, we face the collapse of the criminal justice system.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that the people who did all of those things are currently in prison and are about to be released. So, anyway, I'm joined now by former prison governor, Rona Hotchkiss-Rowley. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. There are serious concerns, namely, initially anyway, by domestic abuse victims, for example, that their abuser is about to be released.
That's right. So although I believe that no one with an actual marker of domestic violence on their criminal record, on their current criminal record, will be released, it doesn't cover all men who have abused their partners. For example, there will be men who have abused their partners in the past, who are not necessarily in prison this time for domestic violence, but they will be released early. There will be men who have been charged with an offence like common assault, and they may be released early. And there, of course, we also know that men who are violent towards their partners are often violent on other occasions too. So there will be men in for other crimes of violence who will also be released. And the most worrying thing is that people, the victims that do know that someone's going to be released, and most of them won't, will not have had time to make plans for their own safety, the safety of their children, for example, relocating or whatever might need to be done, because they would have thought that they'd have another 6 months to do this.
Yeah. Does this need to be done, Rona?
Well, it's a difficult one, isn't it? There are other things that the government could have chosen to do. They could have chosen to put people on house arrest with the HDC or the ankle tag on. They could choose to suspend sentences. But certainly if they don't do any of these things, there just will be no place, no prison spaces left for them. Of course, the other thing they could have chosen to do, it's perhaps a bit more controversial, but I believe the one that 80% of the British public favour is to deport more foreign nationals. Now, there are 10,000 foreign nationals in UK prisons at the moment. The Conservative government deported almost 4,000 last year, but we now have 10,000 in prison. So that is another option they could have picked.
Yeah, it's actually a tremendous point. It is a tremendous point because, I mean, that is one pretty surefire way, I would argue, of both freeing up space and maybe making Britain safer going forward, you know, getting rid of some criminals who we can get rid of. The Labour government has previously said things like no violent criminals would be released, right? But then it turns out that that's not entirely true. Some violent criminals will be released. And now they're saying now that, you know, terror offences or people with sex offences will not be released. So I think there is a question there, isn't there, of whether or not we can really believe that.
Well, that's what I think, Patrick. So it seems clear to me that no one with a current offence, a current sex offence or a current terror offence or a current offence of violence against their partner will be released. But I'm not so sure that that covers past crimes. I've seen nothing to say that it covers past crimes. So we don't know what kinds of offending history these people may have. And
just finally, Rennie, you know, your experience there as a former prison governor, all right, you know, if you're dealing with these kind of people who maybe are repeat offenders or whatever, you know, if you dangle the carrot in front of them that you're basically going to serve 40% of your sentence and you're going to be allowed out earlier on, you know, how does that sit with this lot? I mean, is there any deterrent here now, really, for people, do you think?
Well, no. I mean, any reasonable person, reasonable or not, in prison is going to do anything they can to get out early. So, no, prison isn't currently a deterrent anyway, Patrick.
Right.
This to me is just a symptom of a justice system in absolute crisis. We have to make our mind up in Britain what we want to send people to prison for, and we have to take a more evidence-based approach, what actually works. But it would require parallel funding. We'd have to put millions, possibly billions, into improving community resources, drug and alcohol rehabilitation programmes, better probation services. And by the way, the probation service must be quaking in their boots over this because they're already bursting at the seams without a potential 5,500 prisoners coming out over the next couple of months, because that's what's being proposed.
Yeah. I mean, and it's where they go disproportionately. I mean, we could go on all day about this. I mean, it apparently kicks off tomorrow. I just don't know how people who make these decisions, and I know that this job isn't easy, and, you know, I get to sit here and do this every night, and that is much easier than actually running a government department, and I acknowledge that. But the sleepless nights, I just don't think I'd be able to release these people. I just don't think I could, knowing that something bad could happen, and then I would feel that very, very heavily. But Rona, look, thank you very much, and I do hope to talk to you again soon. I no doubt we will in the coming days. It's Rona Hotchkiss there, who's a former prison governor. Thank you very, very much. Right, OK, so watch out. By the way, I will just say as well, do you remember that time a few weeks ago when we were told to board up entire shopping centres and town centres just in case we had a bit of a riot? Well, tomorrow we do have apparently about 2,000 actual criminals released on the streets. Will we be boarding up the country, will we? But anyway, tomorrow's newspaper front pages have landed, and there is very much one story dominating them.
Do you lead the way? As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment.
Yes, I'll bring you all the very latest on the Princess of Wales's health update. Oh, and I want you to try to tell me what's going on here, please. Down it, quick. I'm very pleased to say I'm going to be joined by the man behind this audacious challenge that is going on at the moment, so don't you dare move.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some clear spells overnight and a cool night compared with recent nights, but it is turning increasingly unsettled towards the north of the UK, with weather systems arriving from the Atlantic. It's not something we've seen for a week or so, and that means heavy and at times persistent rain across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales through the night. Cloudy skies sinking south as well, but we'll keep some clear spells towards the East Midlands, East Anglia, South East England. 11 or 12 Celsius first thing here, but high single figures, low double figures typically elsewhere, and lower humidity compared with the last week or so. So a more comfortable night for sleeping, even if it is an unsettled start to Tuesday with wet and windy weather sweeping through northern Scotland. I think Shetland and Orkney could see some disruption from heavy rain and strong winds during the day, as well as blustery weather for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, heavy showers and gusty winds. An area of rain sinks south during the morning across northern England, reaching North Wales and parts of the Midlands by lunchtime. Ahead of that, we've got thickening cloud for southern parts, with a few showers moving into Wales and the southwest, perhaps one or two developing later in the southeast. So effectively it's a showery day, but with some longer spells of rain at times, for example, the end of the day across southern parts. 19 Celsius in the south, 11 in the far north and northeast with 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and the wind coming from the Arctic. Now, that Arctic wind is going to sweep across all parts by Wednesday. That means it's going to feel cold in the wind, unusually so for the time of year. Frequent showers moving through as well, particularly in the north and northwest, but some sunshine in between, so it's not going to be a complete washout. Fewer showers on Thursday and Friday, more rain in the north this weekend.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Now it's time to bring you the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. So I'm going to start us off with the Metro. Princess's moving update as chemotherapy ends. Kate, my cancer recovery. There is a theme on tomorrow's front pages. We'll go to the Daily Express. Kate's renewed sense of hope after completing chemotherapy. She says, your kindness is humbling. Out of darkness can come light. And there's the picture there of the family there. She's been very humbled by the outpouring of support for her. I'll whiz us on to the Daily Telegraph. I want to stay cancer-free. The Princess of Wales' emotional video with her husband and children reveals scary medical journey and her gratitude for life's simple things, such as loving and being loved. They've got a lot of inside reports on this over tomorrow, including one by Camilla Tominay, who obviously GB News viewers will know very, very well. There are a couple of stories at the bottom here. There's Rachel Reeves piping up about pensioners, saying they'll actually be 1,700 quid better off with us, she says. So it remains to be seen whether or not there's any truth to that. The Independent, they've also gone for the picture story of Kate, William and their children. They've gone for an exclusive on the front. Unions warnings to Labour over winter fuel row. The TUC president says summer riots and rise of Nigel Farage would be a wake-up call for Keir Starmer to avoid deep cuts. Remains to be seen exactly what makes it an exclusive, because we have been reporting on that all day. But we'll whiz ourselves over to the Eye now. Pensioners in poverty, 770,000 set to lose winter fuel payments. They also obviously have the picture there of Kate. Now, look, just before I bring my panel in to talk about the front pages, I think it might be worthwhile as reminding ourselves of a little bit of that video that was released earlier on today. It's a remarkable video, a highly unusual video, but it was released at bang on 4:30 p.m. today from the Princess of Wales. So here's a bit of it.
As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment. Doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus. Although I have finished chemotherapy, my path to healing and full recovery is long, and I must continue to take each day as it comes.
Yes, OK, well, firstly, I mean, you know, massive congratulations and well done on managing to get this far with it all and overcome it all and show strength and dignity throughout everything that's happened over the last year or so. Carol, a very unusual video. Very close up, personal, with the family, with the music in the woods. And all. It was something else.
I think she's been gone for such a long time now, and this is obviously her re-entry into the thing. But I think, you know, I think Kate has had a much tougher time than any of us could have imagined over this. You know, cancer is a devastating diagnosis for anyone. When you're her age and you have very young children, I think people who have very young kids worry about them more than themselves. And I think it's hit her incredibly hard, because remember, she went into hospital with one quite serious thing, and she found this other very serious thing as well. So she had two great big things to deal with. And I think it probably mentally rather than physically, it's been very tough for her to come to terms with what happened after the operation. And I think this is, this is her finally coming to terms with it. It is, I think, because it's odd that she's been off work for so long, because Charles has had chemo too. And so I think what's been happening to her is probably not so much physical, but a mental thing. And I think she's coming to terms with it. And this is a great introduction. But, we can never underestimate the effect cancer has on your head, never mind your body.
And look, I mean, I thought that some of the wording in the video was quite... telling, maybe, is that the right word? Where
opaque almost, isn't it?
Well, so she finished chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe she's necessarily cancer-free. So there's clearly a journey still to be had here.
Well, I think she is.
I think, and we wish her well, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was actually, in terms of reintroduction of Princess Catherine to the British public, it's great, and I think it shows how in touch her and the heir to the throne, Prince William, are. They're a young modern family, but like every single young modern family who has an appalling cancer diagnosis to deal with like this, I agree with Carol, it's extremely stressful. I was a bit worried. We don't know all the details of either the illness she went in to be treated for in the first place, where they discovered the cancer, or her ongoing cancer journey, as she describes it. It was concerning that she's, there just seemed to be a bit of a opaqueness about some of the language, and it may be that this isn't the end for her in terms of that
I think
particular
is easily
journey.
forgotten, actually, and in a way it should be, but actually I also think it shouldn't. The absolute horror show that Kate had to put up with when she was first diagnosed with this, and she was going, this whole Where's Kate saga, this ridiculous media circus and everything. And I just think, what a dignified re-entry into public life, Benjamin.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is, as this video and as a way of announcing the news is very unusual. The fact that she's telling us she's finished chemotherapy, for a longest time, that kind of detail would not be made available about a senior royal like this. So it's notable that she's shared this. And then I think the reason that this high-spec family video in which she talks, she's opaque in the details, but at relative length, suggests that they are having a rethink of how they approach communications as a royal family, because Where's Kate came about because a lack of information, a concern, a conspiracy, and then she did that video, sat on a bench, which comforted a lot of people. At least they knew what was wrong with her. And so I think that's a big shift in comms for the royal family to be doing something like this. It felt very personal. It felt very much the Instagram age.
But you know what I think as well? Looking at that picture with with them on the bench with the kids and her holding Will's hand, we all forget the toll it's taken on him too. He's had to carry on working, terrified about his wife, terrified about what it's doing to his kids, and yet he's had to carry on. And the person who was the partner of the victim never gets thought about very much. But the strain on him must have been tremendous, because dealing with Catherine would have been one thing. He would have been trying to look after her, to feed her emotionally, but he's also looking after his kids and making sure that they don't miss their mum and trying to fill in that role. And I think we forget about the partner in these situations.
No, I couldn't agree more. And there's also this big thing, isn't there, that all the anti-monarchists like to bang on about how the royal family is this massively out-of-touch, weird cabal of poshos and all. You look at that video, though. We just played some clips of it there.
Yes.
And that's proper family stuff, and it's nice, and it's, I mean, goodness gracious me, whoever's put that video together should win an award, It's really, they are human beings, they're nice. They are quite normal people. I mean, that's normal. It makes you really... the kids are climbing trees there. It's all kind of normal stuff, isn't it?
I suspect nothing makes you feel more fallible than cancer.
Yeah.
And, of course, as Carol says, William hasn't just been supporting his wife, raising 3 children, but also his father has clearly been off for bouts of time because he's going through this. And Camilla took a holiday at one point, I'm sure deserved. So the weight on his shoulders has been extraordinary. and the nature of being a royal, you know, she doesn't just have the responsibility of motherhood, but the whole life is about a future role, about being queen.
The future of our nation.
And so, you know, to feel the burden of the country as well
What
as
was
the family.
interesting was that she stood back from that role. I was glad she did. You know, she wasn't trying to work and do, but she just said, nah, I'm taking it.
But it's very different from the Queen, isn't it? Because that was a different era.
Yes.
And there was never explain, never complain. And when the Queen Mother, going back even further, was ill, it was always she may have a fishbone in her throat. The Queen herself was very ill for a long time. No details of her illness were brought out whatsoever. King Charles changed that. He came out and said, I've got prostate cancer. The entire country had a conversation about the King's genitals. And, you know, that massively increased the number of men who were going and getting tested for prostate cancer. It was a hugely positive thing. And, of course, Princess Catherine came out and talked to the nation about her diagnosis. That is completely different. This is a new era for the royal family and not one we've ever lived through before.
And it will save lives. People coming out and talking about it and getting checked and all of that stuff, it will save lives, but also that message of recovery, strength and hope, which she's put out there to show that, you know, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the end, you know, it doesn't have to always be this complete dark
It can bring you, that sort of fear can bring you closer together as a couple and as a family.
Yeah. OK, all right, well, coming up, we'll have some more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, but there is very much a lighter story in town. I'm very pleased to be able to bring it to you. Can you guess what the story is behind this?
Down it, down it, down it, down it, wake up!
The man behind this audacious challenge joins me live and he's next. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss it.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
What prompted you to go on your incredible journey?
Well, you know, I was fighting my own demons at the time, you know, before I started the walk, and it had been a long journey, if you like. And, you know, I knew that I needed to make a change, and my daughter had just flown the nest. I was a single parent before this, and previous to that, I was ex-parachute regiment. And I knew that I needed to make a change because if I didn't, I'm not sure where I would have been now, if that makes sense. So, yeah, something just came into my head at the very end of July and said, look, go and walk the UK coastline. And that's exactly what I did. And 6 years later, we've just finished.
You met your missus on the journey as well, didn't you? So truly, Chris, a transformative journey for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, you step into the unknown like that, you know, you have no idea how things are going to work out. You go out with so little expectation, but only really with the aim to, you know, for me personally, to come back feeling a lot better than what I was before I left. And that certainly succeeded. So everything that happened along that journey was one big learning curve. And I got to learn a lot about myself, a lot about, you know, the public and people. And yeah, it was just a life-changing transformation for me. And, you know, I learned so much and I know what I want to do with the rest of my life as a result of it. And I met the most amazing people and, you know, worked hard. 6 years of carrying your house on your back isn't the easiest feat in the world. I can promise you that, but it was worth every single step because, I rescued a dog along the way. I met my now fiance, Kate Barron, along the way, and we had a baby together along the way as well. So to start in the position that I did and then end up with all of that coming over the line with me was just something that I never expected. And I couldn't have dreamed it up, to be honest.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Now, I've just got two more front pages for you, so I'll get those out of the way for you now. It's the Daily Mail. Kate, out of darkness can come light, so let that light shine bright. That's the Princess revealing her chemotherapy is finished in a very intimate family video. Let's whiz ourselves over to the Times. They go on, dozens of Labour MPs are set to rebel on winter fuel payments. They've also got a story down the side here, which is interesting. Germany is going to halt open border policies amid a migrant crisis and the threat of Islamist attacks. Yeah, duh. But they also have the story there of Kate telling of her relief and of chemotherapy. So, now, look, it's been an incredibly heavy news agenda today, so I thought I'd try something a bit different. If you've ever suffered the embarrassment of having one too many down the pub, then spare a thought for the ex-Tory aide and student who has taken it upon himself to down a pint in every single constituency in the UK. That, my friends, is 650 pints.
Right, we're in the Black Horse Northfield, and here you have Jay Chan about to down his pint. 3, 2, 1. Yes, my bro!
Thank you. Obliterated! Two front of manor!
Bosh, get it in you. Right, I'm joined now by the man himself, Jay Chan. Jay, you absolute legend. Why the heck are you doing this?
Good evening, Patrick. I'm doing this from my past experience with pubs. I work for Marco Longhi, former Member of Parliament for Dudley. That was called Dudley North before the boundary change. That was when the Cricket House, which is next to our constituency, got burnt down. And by that, I started to learn about the pub heritage, understand how important it is. I actually started doing this campaign on my technical first pub when I started the whole thing in Nottingham East. It's called the Old Trip to Jerusalem, which claims to be the oldest pub in England. When I met a guy dressed up as a chicken drumstick, and as well as his friends. And I am amused by what they're celebrating, and I suggested maybe I should down 2 pints in return them voting Tory at the next local and general election, despite that being one of the safest Labour seats in this country. And I did that, and they cheered. They shouted, "Do it for the votes, do it for the votes." That's when I realised how important pub is. They are Green voters, Labour voters, Lib Dem voters. I'm a Tory, one of the, probably the UK's safest Labour seat, and people cheered for me. That's how pubs are. They are heart of communities. They let people to have a good time and put down the differences and even have a good banter. That's why pubs are so important. When I learn about the history, I'm deeply charmed by them. That's why to do that campaign, I want to have a better policy environment overall for pubs around the country, up and down the country.
Well,
That's
this is good. So, Jay, in order to do this, you've got to get to all 650 constituencies.
Yes.
How are you going to do that?
Well, I got to 9, except Nottingham, all are in my own city in Birmingham. So I still got 2 more to do in Birmingham. Today I just done 3. I do manage to have a comprehensible sentence, so impressive for myself. I did down 3 pints in 3 constituencies today, and I'm planning to do more around the West Midlands. And if anyone wants to support me on furthering this to even more areas, just transport me to your
So you need people
area
to take
you're
hitchhiking basically across the UK.
Maybe I just someone just can you drive me to London, and then I down a pint in every constituency in London.
I can sense the cogs in my head are turning on this. I can sense us staying in touch on this one, Jay, and trying to sort something out. But the British pub is in decline. We're losing a ridiculous amount of pubs all the time. It's a real shame because it is a big part of British culture. It's not just the drinking; it's what the pub represents. It's more than just the booze, right? It's really something. And so I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. And look, good luck to you. How long are you hoping this is going to take you? Have you got a time limit in mind?
Well, hopefully the boundary don't change when I manage to do half of it. Well, the campaign really gains its objectives when enough constituencies are done and I've got those 5 policies implemented. In government, and that's why I've written to my party leadership candidates to ask them, would you commit to those 5?
Just quickly, Jay, sorry about this, mate, but we're a bit pressed for time. Just rattle off very quickly for me if you can. What are these 5 policies?
Cut taxes and VAT for pubs. Pubs, food and drink are charged 20% of VAT. That's not fair because in supermarket they're not. In term protection for pending listed buildings and sanctioning right to bid. Local government should be encouraged to help communities list their local pubs. Oppose pub guarding smoking ban and other policies that will diminish pubs, as well as totally ignoring the interests of pubs. And number 5, the basic principle of MPs, politicians understanding and learning about pubs, knowing that they're important, and listen locally and nationally to the voices of pub industry and what they're struggling at.
All right, I'd vote for you. Well done, mate. Good lad.
Thank you.
Look, let's stay in touch. I think there's something beautiful we can do here at GB News with that. So you take care, Jay. All the best, mate.
Yes.
There he is. Hey, good lad. OK.
I can't drink on television.
Yeah, you're not allowed to drink it legally on air, otherwise we get sacked and, I don't know, someone burns the place down or something. But anyway, right, Sandra Beale says, greatest Bristol Union jackass. Carol, who's your greatest Bristol?
I've kind of got to join what it's two. It's Alan Bates, post office campaigner, and Richard Branson, because a few weeks ago when Alan Bates was interviewed, he said, if Richard Branson is listening, I would love to have a free holiday. So Branson, great guy that he is, jumped in, gave him his Necker Island for him to marry his partner, Suzanne Sercombe, there. So they're holidaying in Necker. And can I say, this place costs 40 grand a week? And Branson said, I can't think of anyone more deserving of a break. I can. Me.
OK, go on.
My greatest Britain is Princess Catherine, as she's completed chemotherapy and for all the reasons we discussed moments ago.
Absolutely. OK, go on, Jake.
And mine is Don Shepherd, one of the few remaining D-Day veterans who's died at the age of 104. And I was doing a little bit of research about him, as well as being at D-Day. He was also one of the soldiers who liberated the concentration camps. I think it was Belsen that he liberated, and talked very movingly towards the end of his life about the history that he lived in, a history that lots of people try and deny today. So there's so few of them left. We absolutely have to celebrate our heroes.
We do, and actually, I think I might have been the best hat-trick of people, but I have gone for the Princess of Wales today. So there we go. Right, we're going to have to be quite quick. So who's Union?
Keir Starmer, who said he removed Maggie's portrait from his study because I don't like people looking down on me. Get used to it, mate, because the whole country is, including your own Labour MPs and including your union paymasters.
Oh, smarts a bit, but yeah, go on.
My union jackass is British pensioners.
Oh, my
Just throw them out of studio,
the
seriously.
2.5 million millionaire pensioners who want handouts from the state. I think it's wrong.
You know what?
You really have to stop.
So speaks the modern Labour Party.
Yes.
My jackass is Lee Carsley. If you're going to be England manager...
Unbelievable.
And you're going to take the cash, sing the bloody national anthem. End of.
It is absolutely unbelievable. You know, on day one, how to lose a nation. You know, remarkable.
They should have sacked him before even the game started.
Well, here's the union jackass. Here's the union jackass, Lee Carsley. Just sing the national anthem, mate. I mean, come on. Anyway, right, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed being back with you. There was a minor issue at Nice Airport early this morning, which involved me landing at 10:20 a.m. and then Emily managing to make it on air at midday. But all in all, it's been a long day, but a good one. Thank you very much for being a part of it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. for a little bit more of this raucous madness. Headliners are up next. More in-depth look at all of tomorrow's newspapers. Stay tuned.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some clear spells overnight and a cool night compared with recent nights, but it is turning increasingly unsettled towards the north of the UK, with weather systems arriving from the Atlantic. It's not something we've seen for a week or so, and that means heavy and at times persistent rain across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales through the night. Cloudy skies sinking south as well, but we keep some clear spells towards the East Midlands, East Anglia, South East England. 11 or 12 Celsius first thing here, but high single figures, low double figures typically elsewhere, and lower humidity compared with the last week or so. So a more comfortable night for sleeping, even if it is an unsettled start to Tuesday with wet and windy weather sweeping through northern Scotland. I think Shetland and Orkney could see some disruption from heavy rain and strong winds during the day, as well as blustery weather for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, heavy showers and gusty winds. An area of rain sinks south during the morning across northern England, reaching North Wales and parts of the Midlands by lunchtime. Ahead of that, we've got thickening cloud for southern parts, with a few showers moving into Wales and the southwest, perhaps one or two developing later in the southeast. So effectively, it's a showery day, but with some longer spells of rain at times, for example, the end of the day across southern parts. 19 Celsius in the south, 11 in the far north and northeast, with 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and the wind coming from the Arctic. Now, that Arctic wind is going to sweep across all parts by Wednesday. That means it's going to feel cold in the wind, unusually so for the time of year.
Luck. Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On Tuesday, the 3rd of September, at St Paul's Church in Wilton Place in London, a lucky few will sing highlights from Mozart's Don Giovanni in front of a paying audience with an orchestra and under the baton of Gary Matthewman, the conductor and artistic director of Brunswick Vocal Arts. Why is it important that young singers have this opportunity with an orchestra?
There's a gauntlet, if you like, that I think lots of young singers have to run between finishing the relative comfort of their conservatoire education and becoming firmly established as professional singers. Lots of the ones who show real verve and real promise and work really hard end up for a little bit too long being trapped in a kind of cycle of being the understudy, but some of them are ready to kind of go that extra mile and reach that next milestone. And we as a charity thought, well, what a lovely thing it would be to handpick some of these best young singers, give them intensive coaching on the role that they're going to perform, give them the chance to work with professional players for the first time, and crucially, have the thing professionally filmed and recorded. Because the first question all young singers are asked when they meet somebody influential now is, well, what's your website?
You have coached the singer, coaching the singer either towards a recital or towards their performance, their part in an opera. Tell me a little bit about that process.
It's a case of asking them questions which make them bring a character to life, so that when an audience member witnesses this person singing, they don't just think, oh, that's a pretty noise. They think, oh, there's something going on here that I recognise. And especially in a context like this, which is related, I think, to when people sing recitals. Say they sing 20 songs in that one evening, they've got to present 20 roles, 20 mini operatic roles, if you like. And we need to see the change in their bearing. We need to see the change in their approach to the text, as well as to the kind of the technical focus of their singing and how they produce sound.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7.